If you had to sum up Peter Parker as quickly as possible, it'd be by saying he's one of the world's best superheroes and also simultaneously the unluckiest man in the multiverse. Everything and anything bad that could happen to you has happened to this poor arachnid at some point in his life. The death of countless loved ones, endless maiming, psychological torture, having his life adapted into a terrible live-action Japanese TV show, the list just goes on. That said, it is safe to say that these trials and tribulations never fail to be interesting and entertaining, even if you do feel a bit guilty afterwards for happily watching your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man get his life ruined again and again and again and again. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 worst things that ever happened to Spider-Man. Number 10. Getting his body stolen from him, Superior Spider-Man. Though we all love seeing Otto Octavius run around trying to do good in Spider-Man's body, the Superior Spider-Man series tends to mostly ignore one very crucial thing. That part of Peter Parker is still trapped in said body, and that Otto is a huge monster for trapping the dude in the passenger seat of his own mind. After technically killing Peter by having the two swap bodies as the Doc's frail old form began to perish, Otto would go on to realize that some of the plucky hero was still left in his own original arachnid body. However, Peter was unable to actually do anything other than talk to Octavius, and this goes well into the period where Otto is considered a legitimate superhero in his own right, which is completely messed up because the man had essentially been keeping a secret hostage the whole time, in his own body. I don't even want to consider the logistics of how that worked. Number 9. Having his secret identity revealed, Civil War. While Peter technically did optionally reveal his own secret identity in Civil War, he did so with two things in mind. Firstly, he was repeatedly told by those around him that this wouldn't have an impact on his loved ones. Secondly, he was also told that this would definitely encourage other superheroes to reveal their identity, thus avoiding anyone becoming an illegal vigilante by refusing to comply with the new Superhero Registration Act. Spoilers, but both of these things turn out to be, perhaps unsurprisingly, complete and utter fibs. Not only does Peter's family end up in continual jeopardy because of this reveal, but his grandmother gets shot because of it. Similarly, instead of being encouraged by Peter's example, other heroes actually just get to see how dangerous removing a secret identity is, and thus go even deeper into hiding. Number 8. Not knowing if he was a clone, the Clone Saga. An ever-despised storyline for many Spider-Man fans, the Clone Saga managed to be both a pretty ill-conceived narrative in its own right, and one that also presented a uniquely awful scenario for Peter Parker. That's because, as you might have guessed, the plot repeatedly has Peter unsure whether or not he is a clone, making him question both whether any of his memories are actually real, but also if he is who he thinks he is. While it's not as visceral as, getting your eye torn out or being turned into a gigantic spider monster, there's a very real kind of horror that comes from not knowing if you are who you think you are, and wondering if any of your own personal joys and triumphs are even yours to celebrate in the first place. Number 7. Getting slowly turned into a monster, Spider-Man Volume 3, Issue 3. Peter's life in the entirety of J.J. Abrams' Spider-Man series is pretty rough. Not only does he lose his arm, his wife MJ, and all the Avengers in a huge epic battle, but his requirement to travel for his job as a photographer means that his relationship with him and his son is also absolutely dire. In a way, this series is kinda like superhero torture porn, just even more brutal. However, this specific scenario ends up having some even worse side effects when the young Ben discovers he too has powers, and takes a Spider-Man outfit to wear into the outside world. Immediately, the same villain who killed the Avengers tracks down this child, requiring Peter to rush home to save his offspring, only to be brutally stabbed and then kidnapped by Cadaverous himself. After this, Petey finds himself trapped in an isolation tank with his abdomen full of wires, where he's subjected to Cadaverous's experimentation on him, and said experimentation having transformed countless others into grotesque forms, and now appearing to do the exact same thing to our poor hero. With the series as of yet unfinished, Parker's life still hangs in the balance, leaving the potential that the series might also feature one of his worst deaths to date. Number 6. Watching all of his loved ones die again. Dead No More, The Clone Conspiracy. If someone were to ask me what's the only thing worse than watching the people you care about die, I'd say, well, it's watching them die twice, which is exactly what happens in the Clone Conspiracy storyline, wherein the mysterious Jackal seemingly manages to find a way to bring everyone back who died in all the various goings-on of the Spider-Man franchise. The infamous Parker look clearly extends to friends and family, because they pretty much all immediately start dying yet again, and in completely gross fashion, shriveling up as their bodies completely shut down. As such, Spider-Man's suffering here is twofold, as not only is he having to witness a series of his nearest and dearest become human raisins, but he also has to do so while mentally reliving how they died the first time around as well, which is so much worse. Number 5, running the gauntlet. Amazing Spider-Man number 613 to 633. Almost infamous for how much it threw Spider-Man through the ringer, the Gauntlet storyline is especially hardcore even for people who go into it expecting a tough time. This narrative sees Spider-Man up against a whole host of dangerous villains, 10 of them in fact, including the likes of Mysterio and the Juggernaut, before he can even catch his breath. Except even when he's defeated them, he doesn't really get to, as this story is immediately followed by the Grim Hunt, which proceeds to put Peter up against Kraven the Hunter and his similarly mad family, despite the fact that Spider-Man is obviously more than a little tired at this point. And although our favourite web-slinger does come out on top at the end of all of this, he does so battered, bruised, and mentally fragile. Number 4, getting tortured in really weird ways. Peter Parker, Spider-Man number 25. In this story, Osborn traps Spider-Man in a dark room, starves him, and then gives him no water until he's severely weakened and dehydrated, and then offers him 2 glasses of water, one in light and one in shadow. When Peter picks the glass in the light, he's given an electric shock because apparently being a supervillain is entirely about drinking juice in a dark room by yourself, or something. I think that's Green Goblin's real origin story, or at least that's what Norman thinks it is. Sadly, that is not the end of it, as he also drugs Peter's toothpaste in order to have him hallucinate, just in case everything else seemed a bit too normal. Number 3, accidentally murdering Gwen Stacy, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 121 to 122. Anyone familiar with the timeline of Spider-Man knows that there are precisely 2 events that scarred Peter so badly that they defined him. The first is, naturally, Uncle Ben's murder, and the second is the death of Gwen Stacy. After seeing Gwen dropped off a building by the Green Goblin, Spider-Man rushes to her aid, launching a web that appears to save her until the next panel shows her clearly broken neck. While the incident isn't Spider-Man's fault, many fans have argued that this technically means he killed her, as the whiplash from her fall suddenly completely stopping is what ended her life. Peter himself has expressed serious guilt and grief over similar worries, which is especially awful when you think about the fact that there wasn't anything else he could do but try and save her that way, leaving him wondering whether letting her die or killing her is actively worse. Number 2, being turned into a spider monster, the Spectacular Spider-Man changes. Believe it or not, there are some things that are far worse than any bodily injury or personal tragedy that you could dream up. While the list is admittedly very small, it does contain one definitive entry, written all in capitals, and it's the phrase, turning into a literal spider creature. The ever unfortunate Peter Parker went through this very same nightmarish scenario during the wonderfully named Spider Island arc, which sees its villain bite into Spider-Man and inject him with a toxin that changes his body into a grotesque spider monster in what appears to be a very painful transformation. As you can imagine, this leaves Spider-Man in a twisted spider body until he is mercifully killed, at which point he then promptly births himself. Because at this point, I guess, why not? Number 1, selling his marriage to the devil one more day. One More Day is by far one of the most hated Spider-Man stories there is, and with good reason. The storyline retconned Peter's considerably long marriage with his romantic partner MJ by having Mephisto, Marvel's very own devil stand-in, offer to save the dying Aunt May in exchange for letting him rewrite history so that the pair were never together. It was all painfully clunky, with it proving painful both to the hero and the reader to have to watch as years and years of happiness was just flushed down the toilet because executives executives wanted to go back to a younger, quote-unquote fresher Spider-Man. While time has healed some of the wounds somewhat, it's still one of the worst things to have ever happened to Spider-Man in his sordid history, and that's really saying something considering everything else we've covered on this list. Either way, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are there any mad things that have happened to the wall crawler that I missed off here? And while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe? And while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.